morning. Welcome, everybody. I'm Margot Malachowski, and my pronouns are she, her. I'm an education and outreach coordinator for the network of the National Library of Medicine. And you are now in Blossom, building lifelong opportunities for strength, self-care, outlook, morale, and mindfulness. I have a few housekeeping items before we begin with More Than Resiliency with speaker Abigail Phillips. First, I want to tell folks we do have an event hashtag, and there has been some activity on Twitter. So it's hashtag Blossom 2021. To chat with your fellow attendees, please use the chat tab on the right in the conversations panel on your screen. And if you have a question presenter, please submit those questions in the Q&A tab. And I will be sharing those questions with the presenter after her talk. Okay, so for closed captioning, please go to nnlm.gov/blossomcc. And just a reminder that just by participating in Blossom, you have agreed to the code of conduct. We're all professionals, and we appreciate your cooperation with this. So before we get started, I'm going to run through the acronyms of how we got here. So the NIH is the National Institutes of Health, which is the nation's leading medical research agency. Right now, a lot of you have heard of Dr. Fauci, and he's with the National Center for Allergies and Infectious Diseases, which is just one of many institute centers at the NIH. The NLM, or National Library of Medicine, is an institute at the National Institutes of Health, and it's the largest biomedical library in the world. And it maintains and makes available a vast print collection, and also produces electronic information resources such as Medline Plus and PubMed. NNLM is the network of the National Library of Medicine, and we are the outreach program of National Library of Medicine. RMLs are regional medical libraries, and it's at those regional medical libraries that the network lives, and we create and share regional and national programs such as this. So now I am going to turn it over to Abigail. I'm going to stop sharing my slides.
Okay, and I'll go ahead and share my slides. Somewhere along here. Okay, well, welcome everyone to More Than Resiliency, taking care of library workers in moments of crisis. My name's Dr. Abigail Phillips. I also am on Twitter a lot at Abigail Lee, if you'd like to tweet at me or follow up with any kind of questions at the end. I'm an assistant professor at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in their iSchool, and I'm really excited today to present even more about LIS mental health and talk a little bit about resiliency or resilience, because it's a word that's been cropping up more and more especially during this pandemic time. So what is resiliency? I'm sure you've all heard of it. I've seen resilient or resiliency or resilience pop up in many emails from my administrators where I work at the university. So maybe you have too, from administrators or supervisors. So APA, the American Psychological Association, calls it the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or significant sources of stress, such as family relationship problems, serious health problems, or workplace and financial stressors. So I found this graphic that I thought was great to share. I started to have some issues with the word resilience because, as I'll go deeper into, into the definition, or what it's been kind of marketed as trying to make yourself resilient, is that bouncing back aspect, that elasticity that comes from, that you're supposed to bounce back almost immediately from any kind of trauma, significant stress like the pandemic. It's just, I don't know who can bounce back within like an instant. I don't know if you hear my snap, but I'm trying. But I thought this in particular really showed, it just makes it sound so easy to be resilient. I don't consider myself a resilient person, to be honest. It takes me quite some time to get over a failure or something, a relationship that ends or a friendship that ends. But they focus on managing your personal energy, shifting your lenses, and finding your sense of purpose. None of this is bad. I think it's all really great. And resilience in itself, I think at its core, isn't a bad concept, but I think the way it's been moved into the workplace has made it a very complicated concept. And it really waters down the actual process of dealing with grief, trauma, and other stress events. So stuff we're going through right now. I don't know about you, but so many stressful events are going on. So just a quick Google search of resiliency brought up some really interesting articles from everything from American Psychological Association to basic definitions, everyday health, and stuff from the Mayo Clinic. The main thing that I did to point out is the Mayo Clinic's resilience, building skills to endure hardship. I think that's something to really focus on when you're thinking about the workplace. Are you thinking about consistent hardship in your workplace? Because that is not a stressor that you want to endure for the long term. I understand that you might have something painful or stressful, or maybe really not an intense trauma that happens at the workplace, but humans aren't built to withstand stress for an extended period of time. And when we're thinking about the pandemic, we've been going underneath this stress for over a year now. It's a really long time. And I would hate to think that anybody's in a workplace that continuously places a hardship on them. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of some of the topics that come up when you're just doing a brief glance at what does resilient mean, or resilience, or resiliency. So many words. I keep clicking the wrong button to go next. So I did want to highlight a couple benefits of resiliency. And the funny thing about this is this is a consistent image that I found when I Googled resilience or resiliency. It was a plant growing out of the cracks of the sidewalk or concrete. I just thought that spoke a lot to what the word actually means. I get where they're going with this, that you persevere and work through what the stressful things that are happening, but it's a very eye-catching image. So there is that bouncing back concept, that you encounter a struggle and you, in a sense, you gather yourself, you fall back on some sort of ideally healthy skill set that you have built up along your life since childhood, and that you group yourself up, get back to whatever you're doing, get idea. In the place of what resiliency we're talking about, it's often in the place of the workplace. Resilience and resiliency also helps you have responsiveness to trauma and other stressors. There's so many events that happen in our life. It is good to have, again, a set of skills that you can rely upon, whatever those are, whether we'll go in later into when we're talking about more mental health and mental illness, talking about therapy, seeing psychiatrists, having friends and family that are understanding of what mental illness and mental health really are and what you need. But I can see where resilience does help you build those skills. And some of the long-term benefits that the research has shown is personal growth, as you combat failure or just having those moments where you fall apart. I know I've had many of those. Build an ability to handle difficult circumstances and improve self-esteem. So your improved idea of your self-worth as you overcome these stressors. Maybe not in the short term, but in the long term, when you look back, you think about everything that's happened to you, and you see the benefits of, I guess, resilience, or the benefits of just you being a really strong person, or just keep going. Keep clicking the wrong button. So problems of resiliency, because I have my critiques, obviously. The bouncing back, the elasticity of you stumble and, oh, you're supposed to get back up. Oh, if you're a student, you failed an assignment. If you're like me, you got a paper rejected. Immediately, it almost seems like with resilience, you're supposed to bounce back from that and get up and just carry on, almost as if nothing happened. And I remember going to a symposium where someone was talking about because I do quite a bit of research focusing on adults, and they were talking about youth resiliency. And a lot of the core aspects of the skill sets that I mentioned, the resiliency, start really when you're in childhood, back when just your home life, the experiences that you have as a child. But I really question the speaker about that concept of bouncing back, because it's not that easy. There are some situations where you can't bounce back. It's not that you can't overcome them, but you can't, that maybe it takes time. Something like grief or a pandemic or a serious, like a tornado or hurricane, something like that, something that's extremely life-changing. It's hard to bounce back from that. And I question the use of that, like that quote that I kept hearing and kept reading about. And it also places the burden on the individual. It doesn't really talk about how others can help, or maybe the workplace can help. It's all on you. It's all on you to bounce back from this traumatic situation, especially when you're thinking about a traumatic situation that happens at work. You would think that your employer or your coworkers or somebody would be there for you, would be there to support you. And I really hope you do have somebody like that. And I hope you work in a healthy environment that doesn't place the burden entirely on you. But resilience just seems so much of a load for you to carry as an individual. And then there's the appearance of weakness, that if you don't bounce back, there's something inherently wrong with you. And that's just not true. That's just being human. It takes time. Grief takes time. Getting over failure takes time. Getting over just different circumstances that happen in life. All these take not just time, but serious contemplation, whether it's with just yourself or with a therapist or with a family member or a friend, somebody. But when we'll talk about resilience, it also often seems like the individual is weak if they don't have that, I cannot say that word to save my life. Not even going to say it, bouncing back. They don't have that stretchiness of just getting back up and, oh, I'm good. What happened yesterday is over. I wish maybe there are people like that, and I don't aspire to be like that. I think there's a lot to be said for contemplation and really thinking about what you've been through. But those are interesting people to know. And it perpetuates harm. I saw somebody on Twitter. I was trying to find the tweet. I dug, but they mentioned this, that really when you're thinking about saying, again, I've been getting a lot of these emails from our chancellor or other administrators within my university about how resilient we are, how resilient our community is. But in many ways, that just means giving freedom to continue that harm, continue to hurt this person because they're so resilient, because they can step back up, and that puts you in a problematic place, I would think, of trying to make sure still have time. Yes, it puts you in a place of where you're constantly being bombarded by trauma and stress, and you're supposed to be resilient. You're supposed to be able to step up and just gather yourself. And for so many of us, especially those who are struggling with a mental illness or some kind of mental health concern, not necessarily true. So resiliency in LAS, I've really seen the growth in the use of the word. I even noticed, I was doing a little bit of research yesterday, and ALA even has a scholarship for resilient communities. So communities that have been impacted by a natural disaster or the pandemic or some kind of economic fallout. So there's been a growth that I've just noticed more and more, even in everyday language. And largely it's very pandemic focused, how resilient we are, how we push through, especially at the 1 year mark, how far we've come. And in many cases with resiliency, it's to the workplace. That's a lot where I've really seen it, in productivity. Resiliency and being a resilient person, it seems to go hand in hand with, you can get over this trauma and you be productive. And I already have issues with the concept of productivity, being more productive, constantly being productive. I'm in an industry where I'm in academia, and maybe many of you can also relate. And as when I was a public librarian, the productivity level is high, even during the pandemic. And you have that constant in the back of your mind. I got to be productive. I've got to be productive. So when you're expecting this resiliency, you're expecting them to bounce back from something. I keep talking about the pandemic, but this is what we were going through. Something like the pandemic, where productivity, it just you have to throw it out the window and do the best you can. And again, as I mentioned before, it's frequently used by administration. That's where I largely hear it from, and where all the emails that I get, I'm basing some of this on just the sheer amount of emails that use the word resilient or resilience, how resilient we are. And I think that's maybe a panacea, kind of covering all and saying, yes, we're just going to ignore those that are struggling. We're going to ignore those who have tragically maybe ended their life because of what's going on in the pandemic, or those who, like myself, struggle with mental illness and find this constant need for productivity just awful and sometimes unbearable. So we'll talk a little bit. I want to make sure, I keep checking my watch because I want to make sure we have time for some dialogue. Mental illness and stigma. I'm sure many of you are already really familiar with the stigma that's attached to mental illness. There's the word itself, mental illness, it's not that it's not used, but I think mental health, well-being, self-care, these terms that seem a little bit softer have less stigma attached to them. But when you use the word mental illness, seems to be a red flag. And I could talk for quite a length about the stigma attached to illness, but it is something that we really need to, I think we're making progress. I'm a part of a group, the LAS Mental Health Project, where we create zines that everybody contributes, poetry, just whatever they want to contribute that reflects the mental strain that they're undergoing. I think that's helping to curb, at least I hope in some small way, the stigma attached to mental illness within our field, and in particular, and I hope that it's stretching further. But this stigma has been attached for a very long time. I'm starting to see some glimmer of hope, especially, again, with the pandemic and with there's an increased awareness that this has created a very high strain on people, a lot of depression, anxiety, isolation, social anxiety. I don't know if any of you have struggled with some of these, but I know social anxiety, mine has increased. But when I've been doing some research about just the sheer amount of, what's the word I'm looking for? Not necessarily advertisement is the closest word I can think of. From our counseling center, it's usually directed at students, but it is recognizing that there's a mental health crisis going on, and it's offering virtual counseling, for wellness tutorials. I'm not sure how effective some of these are, but at least they are acknowledging that there is something going on. And hopefully that kind of decreases or helps out with this stigma, helps away that stigma. So what can you do to help? I think there's a lot that we can support somebody who's going through a mental health crisis, or struggling with a long-term mental illness. I would fall into that category. And a lot of it revolves around talking about mental health. So you can set some sort of time away with a colleague if you think that they're going through something, if you've noticed a change in their behavior, and do this in a compassionate, empathetic way. Because I've been confronted I've been confronted in ways that are less than ideal or less than empathetic. But and let them share as little or as much as they want to. I do this with my students as well when they have. I have a policy in my syllabus about that focuses on student emotional and psychological well-being, and I want them to share as little or as much as they want with me. Just let me know that something is going on and that assignment is not as important as their well-being. I think this is the same when you're thinking about a colleague or a friend that you happen to work with. Just let them share and engage in active listening. Really listen. Ask questions, and really, just listen. Don't interject. Don't be judgmental, because what's just anybody walking along the street that we encounter every day, or at the coffee shop, or family members. You have no idea what people are going through. I think this gets repeated a lot, but it's just so true, and something to remember that you don't know what people are going through. So I think the great thing that you can do is be empathetic and passionate and kind. And so keep your questions open-ended. So maybe, why don't you tell me how you're feeling? Or instead of saying, I can see that you're depressed, or I can see you're not doing great. Try to take yourself out of the place. Just ask how they're doing. Maybe they don't want to talk about it, and that's completely fine. But at least you're acknowledging that you see that they're in some kind of struggle, and that you're there for them, and that you support them. Maybe if you want to share something if you feel open enough to share something that's gone on with your own past or present, share that with them. Really listen carefully to what they tell you. Maybe repeat back some of the key things that they say. That really goes to that active listening, that showing that you're engaged and that you acknowledge what they're experiencing. Because so often when you're dealing with a mental illness, people don't acknowledge that you are experiencing a crisis, that you're dealing with something very significant. And offer to help them find support in so many different ways. If you're a student, there's the counseling center, probably a counseling center, ideally a very nice one. I've been to enough different universities that I've seen some really great ones and some really not great ones, but offer to take them to the counseling center, or just offer to call somebody for them. I know when I'm in a bout of depression, looking for help can be really, really hard. So doing that for them, offering to provide information, especially in our field. I think this is particularly important, that we know where all the information is. And of course, we're not licensed counselors or therapists, but we know where the information is and we can direct them to places. Also know your limits. Take care of yourself. You want to help somebody as much as you can, but without at a detriment to your own mental health. So take yourself, and remember self-care has become such a word, a fluffy word, but take care of yourself. Find ways, whether it's through meditation or yoga, or if it's like with me, I need to see a therapist once a week. I go to a psychiatrist because I'm on medications. That's also a form of self-care that we don't talk about too often. We focus on the more tangible, like buying things. That's a whole other story. So I wanted to leave some time to talk, but I wanted to mention a couple of resources. I know you all probably already know about these because the founder of Mindful in LIS is going to speak tomorrow, I believe. But if you haven't, for some reason, I was going to pull up their kind of mission statement that I thought was really lovely. It offers a safe and supportive place to learn more about mindful and reflective practices. Library workers are frequently asked to work in hectic environments. Mindfulness asks us to bring our awareness gently back to the present moment. Mindfulness in LIS aims to provide tools, discussion, and educational programs to reframe the narrative of current work culture in libraries. And if you don't follow them on Twitter and Instagram, you really should. I find a lot of, I'm a very affirmations, motivational quotes, but without the self-help aspect that's more kind of like mindful in LIS. And with Renewers LIS, is promoting empathy, which I love, and self-preservation in the workplace. So I think these are both strong communities to be a part of. And they're also on Twitter, Instagram, and I can provide those links at later, but I'm sure you all already are well aware of them, but if not, I will let you know. And using the hashtag LIS mental health, I use it frequently. Just now I'm not going to see my therapist. It's now all virtual. So when I'm seeing my therapist, sometimes I make a comment, sometimes a little bit what I think is funny. I don't know if anybody else is amusing, but I will comment with the hashtag LIS mental health, because to me, I think it's helping to normalize therapy. And that's extremely important because it's a normal thing. I know so many people that are in therapy. Maybe people aren't comfortable sharing that they're in therapy, but I mean, that's their business. But I think this is a great community to be a part of. I'm really happy that I'm part of this team. And the lismentalhealth.org is the website sprung off of the project. And there's blog posts, there's links to resources specifically for LIS individuals, so students, librarians, library workers, everyone. So I would really encourage you to check out that website and participate. So by using the hashtag on Twitter or on Instagram, you're being a part of the community and you're showing your support for mental health and decreasing that stigma attached. And I wanted to close with this because I thought it was really nice from Renewers LIS. So be patient with yourself. I think that's something we can that resonates for just the world we're in right now and beyond. We should always be patient with ourselves because we're always learning and growing and changing and perhaps becoming resilient. If instead of that, I just am more focused on building success that I can fall back on when I'm in a state of crisis. So thank you so much. I hope my little rambling talk was a benefit to you all. I have questions, comments, these are where you can find my email. I'm always happy to answer emails, my Twitter handle, and I have a website where I blog about LAS and mental health. Amazing. What a surprise.
Thank you. We are getting some questions. One of the first was for the link for the zines, which somebody nicely put into the Q&A. So I just shared it. I'll share it one more time because the chat goes by so fast.
It's really cool.
That's great. So there's you did talk about this some, but how to approach someone who you sense is struggling, and where do you go with, like, I noticed, or is that, or do you just go with, how are you doing?
I think the gentle way of, well, I've noticed just you've seen there's a change in because I've had people confront me. I remember when I worked in the library, and I was actually crying. So they confronted me like, "Are you okay? I've noticed you've been down recently." I think it depends on the person. You can kind of get a sense of how to approach an individual. I think it's really case by case. Because for some people, it might be better to go, how are you doing? Or maybe that's kind of I don't know, blasé, but some people are just going to say, yeah, I'm fine. But if you do it in a tone that's compassionate, I think people are going to respond in a healthier way.
Yeah. There's questions about the workplace. So how do we build this idea of strength and flexibility in our workplaces without talking about productivity? We are providing library services. So how do we make that? How do we move things into a healthier direction?
I think a lot of it depends on being a little bit easier on ourselves, and hopefully administration being more understanding. I know within this conference, there's been talk from there's presentations about supervisors. And I think that's really great. Having some kind of skill set or having some kind of awareness about psychology, human development, social work, because at the front, if you work at the front desk of a library or anywhere in the library, you're going some of the natural skills of a social worker or a therapist, not that we are those, they come out because you're listening, you're asking questions, and people come to you with a problem, to you in a moment of need. I wish I had a simple answer for how to solve it all, but I think it's a group effort, and really sharing information, sharing what we've learned in conferences like this.
That's right.
And really making an effort.
Yeah, I think just raising the conversation is great. And again, you did talk a bit about this, but how to commiserate with someone that things are awful right now, but without going toward your own personal harm. How do you keep afloat, I guess, if you're working with somebody that's struggling?
I think there's a very delicate balance between commiserating with somebody, like just talking honestly about what's going through. I know I've done this when I was a librarian, and I do this with my workplace now, but it can veer on the side eventually of being an unhealthy conversation, and you're just and it's just like you mentioned, it's just going to hurt you in the long run. But I do think you need somebody to say, like, hey, this seems odd, or this isn't did you get this impression that I think having somebody else helping you acknowledge that things aren't great, and having, I guess, a buddy, and I don't know a friend out there with you that knows that what you're going through, and they're going through a lot of the same things. And if you're in a toxic enough workplace, knowing, I hate to say, knowing when to quit, especially in this climate where people are out of work, but if it's at such a degree that it's really affecting your mental and physical health, because I know I've experienced a workplace that just did serious damage to both of those, you need to know when to leave.
Yeah. So how there was some mention about, we've talked about cultural competencies and different kind of competencies. And if we're moving toward more competency over mental health, mental illness, is there an opportunity to get a little more specific, instead of this, a broad umbrella of mental illness?
Yes.
How do you feel about that?
Getting more specific for different cultures? Or
different cultures or different types of mental illness, actually.
Different types of mental illness.
People's needs could be different.
It's true. And there's such a broad, again, there's so many different mental illnesses. And I think once we can deal with the stigma of the mental illness itself, we're a lot better off, because I know some mental illnesses are more stigmatized than others, like bipolar or schizophrenia, or people who are dealing with substance abuse or anything like that, than maybe somebody who's dealing with depression. Not that one is better, one is in a worse place than the other, but we're all struggling with our own situation. But I know there's been a lot of discussion about, I did want to mention that, talking about, because I know we're working on this with the LIS mental health, working on how different cultures respond to mental health crises. Because if you're Asian American, if you're Black, you're going to respond differently than a white person. To be honest, I mean, at least I've learned from others that there's just all sorts of cultural aspects that maybe keep them away from going to get therapy, or keep them away from going to a psychiatrist. I mean, there's definitely a history of medical malpractice, or just awful, that will keep some groups from going to seek help. I went off on a tangent. Now I forgot what the question was.
No, just broadening our understanding of different types of mental illness too. I think that I used to work in a library where we just left brochures of different specific types of mental illness, and they went, they were picked up off of the table. So it might be easier to pick up something in print on schizophrenia, for example, than to ask a reference librarian. And,
that would be an uncomfortable, or not uncomfortable, but that might not be the best. Yeah, leaving these kind of open-ended ways to find information, as you said, leaving brochures and pamphlets, or just cards where you can locate more we can locate more resources and people that can help.
I think some of it is fear-based. We don't understand it. Yeah.
And so.
Okay, so asking for time off for mental health, and this, actually, I was on Twitter this morning having a little conversation about, do you take sick time for mental health days or vacation time for mental health days? And, I would fall on the side of, take a sick or wellness day, I guess,
Take that sick leave. Take your paid time off. Don't hesitate. I mean, I when I was a brand new librarian, my first year, for some reason, I decided not to take any paid or sick leave. And I think that's one of the first causes for me to, the word burnout is it's such an interesting word, but I think it led to me eventually burning out because I took a year where I didn't take any time for myself when I needed mental health days. So please take those days. That's what sick days, I mean, they don't tell you that a mental health day is just as important as if you have a cold or you have the flu or something like that. Make sure to take your time.
Mm-hmm.
I fully support that.
Yeah, I think too, during this time when a lot of people are working from home, it's kind of been a tricky call to take vacation or to take sick leave. But we still need a break, even though even more so in some days because we're at home.
I know it's hard to separate work from home. At least I've learned that. So having a certain day that's a sick leave day, I think that might help.
Yeah. So we have a question about what happens if a staff person's behavior becomes unprofessional? And this could be due to pandemic fatigue. And yeah, do you have any thoughts about that?
Yeah, when it crosses into unprofessional, I really don't have a firm answer. I wish I did. I don't know if anybody has a better answer than I do. I don't have as much experience on the managerial or on that side of the.
Right.
So I would love to hear feedback for what should be done.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm just looking at the chat a little bit. So there's somebody is sharing that they have a difficult topics wall shelf where they have all sorts of information, everything from mental health, sexual health, self-care, that sort of thing.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. Somebody's mentioning unions, and I saw in another question, not every library offers opportunity to join a union, but do you have any idea of the benefit of unions toward protecting people's time or getting people resources? I haven't been in a union myself, so I can't really.
I've only recently, I'm in the union at my university as a librarian. I worked in Georgia, and unions aren't really not allowed there, but really discouraged. So I've never worked as a professional librarian or library worker under a union, but I would imagine from what I know about unions that they have the workers back more so than, say,
right.
An organization or maybe an employer. So they would argue, ideally they would argue for an increased amount of paid sick leave or paid time off, especially I know too many people that have just run through their sick leave because they've been struggling with something very serious. And if you go to HR, they might not be as understanding, like, why do you need more time off? You've already run through all your time. But if you're dealing with something like schizophrenia, or you're having a bipolar episode, or you're in a depression where you can't get out of bed, I don't know how you can go to work and function. So in my mind, a union would have your back. But again, if there's somebody, I know there's tons of people because I heard I heard them speak at Calm last week that are very union knowledgeable. I'm very new to unions.
Yeah, somebody's mentioning donating sick time, and I've heard, I worked in a previous job where you had the ability to donate. If you had a lot of sick time, you could donate it to a colleague. So that's a great idea.
It is. I've never had that ability.
So, people are chiming in that that's something you can do. But it looks like sometimes there's a requirement, there's people have to qualify for that, I guess.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. Yep. People people are chiming in about that. So that's great.
Good. I'm glad. I wanted there to be conversation because that's just such a topic where conversation is needed.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Oh, and somebody else is saying that unions also have that shared sick bank. Some unions have that where people can request. So it's a question about advocacy efforts for part-time library workers, and I'm not sure if that means, for benefits because they tend to not be benefited, or but it also makes me think about the option of part-time work if you need to scale back for a time being. Have you heard of folks doing that? Just saying, I just need a little, like I might not want to not work at all, but I might, if I could just work 20 hours for a couple weeks or something.
I have heard of some people
doing it?
Scaling back. That does cause complications with your benefits, but ideally you would have an employer that's compassionate. I say ideally a lot. You would have an employer that would acknowledge that you're dealing with something and still continue offering you some source of insurance or just support in general. But I do not. I have heard of people taking some time off or taking a significant time off, like just an entire leave, just to deal with, or sometimes in more serious situations, like going to a mental health care facility, or
sure,
because sometimes you need that.
Yep. Yeah. Let's see. So somebody was asking if FMLA is usable for a mental crisis, but it would mean you'd need to disclose your situation for the paperwork. I don't know enough about FMLA to know if that's a qualifying. Oh, but he says yes, they've used FMLA. Yeah, and somebody else. So you can. So I know that kind of, and I think this was mentioned in another one of these sessions yesterday about what do you reveal to your employer, because if you are expressing that you have certain needs at certain times or whatever, but there's also the vulnerability of having them know something that might feel very private to you at the same time. Is this something that folks are exploring on the groups that you mentioned or the zines? Do people share that sort of experience?
Yes, some people, we do allow, not allow, but some people choose to be anonymous on the zines, on their submissions, but some include their names. And I know we've had Twitter chats where people will talk about what's been happening in their workplace, their engagement with their employer or their supervisor or colleagues. And yes, this is a really great chat. I should probably not look at it while I'm trying to answer a question. I know from personal experience, I've had good, really great, and really bad. I did have an employer, a library director, when I told her, because I was in the stacks crying, and she called me because I was dealing with a severe depression, and she called me into her office, and I don't know why. I never really mentioned to people that I was dealing with anything at that time. Now I'm super open about it. But I told her I was depressed, and she asked me what I was depressed about, and that's kind of killed the conversation because I what are you depressed? There isn't a thing. It's everything.
Right.
But then I had a supervisor. I had a panic attack when I was on a panel at ALA, and I wrote a blog post about it, and I shared it, and he read it, and we had a really great conversation about if I needed some time off, or if I needed to step away for a minute or need to lighten my workload. He was really understanding. So, which was really amazing. I did not expect that, especially in academia, which can be a cold place sometimes. But so in a public library, I didn't have a great experience, but that was one public library. But
Right.
in other cases, I have had some really great experiences that people do understand. And maybe that's shifted over the years, that just people becoming more aware that that people are dealing with lots of depression, anxiety, eating disorders, problems, just any kind of problem.
Yeah, so somebody's talking about like that everybody's having a hard time right
it's
now.
It's true.
And that, and then it's hard when folks are taking a break, it leaves an organization short-staffed.
That's very true.
Adds to, and I know some people won't take time off because they'll think, I'm going to leave the work short-staffed, so there's that too. So,
oh, that's a good point.
Yeah. So that's, okay. So some people are feeling frustrated they don't feel like they can influence change in their workplace. So I don't know. I'm hoping that this conference these days that we're spending together kind of helps us all,
I hope so.
together, grab some ideas and even feel supported among each other that can make some influence. This may be a moment in time when we can start to influence things.
And just sheer knowing that you're not alone, that there are other people within, not just within LAS, but on this planet that are going through things like you are. Hopefully that would give you a little bit of just, I can't think of the word now, but I hope that would give you a little bit of confidence, or just
I'm seeing in the chat. Yes, I'm seeing in the chat some people are saying short staffing isn't your problem.
That's true.
That's true. That's true. Okay. All right. Let me see if there's. And then people who won't take time off. Yeah.
That was me. For some weird reason, just not going to take time off.
Yeah.
And then end up burnt out.
Yeah. No, I have some people near and dear to me that are loath to. They were like no absentee kids, growing up. Went to school every day.
Oh,
and that's just it's like a work ethic thing. That they don't want to miss, but
some kind of perfectionist tendencies. I don't know. I can definitely see myself in that category.
Yeah.
Oh, that's true. You come back to a pile of work. I'm the one who think about it while I'm on my sick leave, which is not healthy at all.
No. When I worked in public libraries, sometimes they would say, "Oh, these Monday holidays aren't worth it. You have twice as many books to check in the next." And I'd say, "No, it's entirely worth it." All right. Let's see if I've got another.
It's a great chat.
Yeah.
Yes, Brittany, take that birthday week off.
Yeah. Yeah, but some people are, kind of this, just to have a broad conversation about it, about the, about short staff thing. That is a reality, and people, whether or not you're not responsible for the staffing, but then the people who are working in a short staff situation are there working under those circumstances. Not that you have to fix that, but it is a reality too.
It is. It's true.
Yeah. All right. Hope you're giving their tips of when they like to take time off.
It's always good. Some conversation about short staffing.
Yeah.
That is an area, it's something to think about.
Yeah. All right. Well, I think that we're kind of winding down a little bit.
I know I ended
Yes.
my discussion a little early because I forgot that it wasn't ended at 2. It's 2:15. That was my mistake.
No, and somebody is asking if we can get a copy of the chat, but I don't think that's a part of what we can do here. But this has been wonderful. I do encourage those of you who tweet. I know not everybody does, but there is conversation going on there.
Oh, great.
So that would be great. And yeah, somebody said should just migrate to the hashtag LIS mental health. So that would be great to see folks there.
Yeah, I would love. It's a great hashtag. I've always seen what people post on it because it true. Like somebody else mentioned, it's nice to know other people out there that are sharing some of the same emotions, going through the same things.
Mm-hmm. Oh, somebody's checking the tweets and says they're good. Yes, I totally support the normalizing taking time off. So. All right. Well, I am going to finish this up here. Thank you so much. People
this was wonderful.
Really gotten a lot out of it. We do have a half-hour break before the next session. I do encourage you to step away from your screen for a few minutes, move around, get something to drink or whatever, take care of yourself. And then if you do come back early, we have an arena area that has some booths, and then we have a lounge area where you can connect with your fellow attendees. So thanks so much to everybody for attending today's session, and we'll see you soon.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks for watching. This video was produced by the network of the National Library of Medicine. Select the circular channel icon to subscribe to our channel, or select a video thumbnail to watch another video from the channel.